Todd's Odds, brought to you by FanDuel. Here he is, Todd Fuhrman, super pumped about his Vegas Golden Knights and their big win over the Habs on Thursday night. Todd, how you feeling about your Golden Knights right now?
Hey, they're playing well, Jay. They've shown an ability to win tight-checking, low-scoring games, and they wanted a good old throwback today to try and make folks in Montreal feel like they are watching a game in the queue instead of NHL-caliber goaltending out there.
That's an excellent assessment. Buffalo Bills made a coaching change this week, firing Ken Dorsey following a disastrous loss to the Broncos on Monday. They're now plus 176 to make the playoffs on FanDuel. Is that a line that you still think is bettable, Todd?
I mean, look, a few hours earlier, Jay, I would have said the Bills' playoff prospects look to be pretty bleak. But the way quarterbacks are dropping in the AFC North, I mean, the Bills may only be 4 or 5 other starters away from being the #1 seed overall in the conference. But when you look at the Bills, this is a game they should go out there and win this weekend as a touchdown favorite against the Jets, even if the Jets have had their number. But their schedule is absolutely daunting going forward. So if this team can't rectify all that's ailing it on the offensive side with a defense that's really banged up, plus 176 isn't enough to get me involved in Buffalo. But I do think we could see some value in the Bills week to week instead of big picture.
Todd, we have not talked about the AFC South extensively or really at all. And that's because it kind of looked like Trevor Lawrence and the Jags had this thing locked up. And yet here comes C.J. Stroud, second overall pick, looking very un-rookie-like. They've won 3 of 4. D'Amico Ryans has changed the culture there, Todd. Are the Jags in danger?
I mean, Jay, honestly, I don't think you're guilty. I don't think I'm guilty. I don't think anybody outside of the 4 cities where those AFC South teams reside has been talking about this division. And I'm pretty sure in Jacksonville, given what we saw on Sunday, a lot of Jags reporters didn't want to talk about them after that 34-3 loss. Next week's game is massive. I mean, of course, Jacksonville has a game this weekend against the Tennessee Titans and the Texans and a little bit of a trap spot against the Arizona Cardinals. But Houston has a chance to sweep the season series. They beat Jacksonville earlier this year. Jacksonville projects to be about a 1.5 point road favorite if there's a status quo. But I think Jacksonville just has too much pedigree. I love the storyline from C.J. Stroud. He's making the Texans relevant, putting up video game-like numbers. And, Jay, I can't remember the last time we talked about a player who was more or less a shoo-in to an Offensive Rookie of the Year, inserting himself in the NFL MVP discussion the exact same way.
Todd, a mutual friend of ours once said you should always take the over, but this year, scoring way down in the National Football League, and unders are king, and especially for primetime games, unders are king. Is this something we can kind of trust going forward, Todd, or do you think the totals will eventually adjust and we can hit those overs again?
I'm hoping that mutual friend may or may not have adjusted his betting pattern, given what we've seen in the NFL so far this season. But I think when you look at the market and we talk about it being the ultimate model of efficiency, odds makers are going to adjust. And gradually these totals will continue to tick down. Thursday night's game, the perfect illustration, as we saw the total between the Bengals and the Ravens open at 44 and end up closing 46.5. So while the public wanted to bet it under, professional bettors had a different mindset. I know this is going to sound like a Hallmark greeting card, a cliche, a bit poetic, but every game, Jay, truly is a snowflake, and I think folks have to handicap each one for its own individual merits, more so than latching onto a trend if odds makers start adjusting these totals down a touch.
That makes sense to me. Last week, Todd, we finally stopped asking you about your Super Bowl pick, and we simply asked you to start eliminating teams that you were sure were not going to win the Super Bowl. So last week you mentioned the Bears, the Panthers, the Giants, and the Jets, the Raiders, and to some people's surprise, the Steelers. You said that none of those teams will win the Lombardi this year. Are there any other teams you'd like to add to Todd's list of teams that will not hoist the Lombardi trophy?
I mean, the Steelers, Jay, may or may not have been because I like to make my life at home completely miserable. And since my wife doesn't watch Canadian TV, I can say these things that I can't domestically. So that may or may not have been the reason behind that. But we're going to add 3 more teams to this list, and you see them at 26, 25, and 24. The New England Patriots, forget about it. They're done. Mac Jones getting pulled in the 2-minute drill in Frankfurt, Germany. You can write that team off. The Tennessee Titans are going to live through the Will Levis experiment, for better or worse. They're planning for the future. And the Green Bay Packers, I've seen enough from Jordan Love. He may not be the quarterback of the future, But the one thing I can tell you, Jay, is he's not going to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback this year. So look at that. We've eliminated, by my count, I think that's 8 teams, maybe 9. I can't really count all that well. So we're making progress. By the time we get to the postseason, we'll have that list pared down a considerable bit more.
All right, and finally, Todd, we cannot let you go without asking you about a Grey Cup pick, the Grey Cup on TSN this weekend, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Montreal Alouettes in Hamilton. Todd, who do you like in the big game?
I mean, look, Jay, the Alouettes have been a little bit of a Cinderella story this year, and unfortunately for the Owls, I think the clock strikes midnight, but you do want to pay attention to that Blue Bombers injury report here. We know what Zach Collaros can do under center, but there may be some key cogs missing from Coach O'Shea's bunch, but I still think the Bombers find a way to win the Grey Cup this weekend.
And that would be their 3rd in 4 years, a true dynasty in the making. Todd Fuhrman, you're the best. Have a terrific weekend, my friend.